I never thought I'd meet someone who'd willingly throw themselves into danger for me, but that's exactly what Marcus did, over and over again, and I was too stupid, too scared, or maybe too broken to understand why until it was almost too late. My name's Ryan, and I'm a wildland firefighter. Not the kind you see pulling up to house fires in the city, but the ones who hike miles into remote wilderness with nothing but hand tools and backpacks, cutting fire breaks and lighting backfires to stop massive forest fires from consuming everything in their path. It's brutal, dangerous work, and I loved it. Or at least, I used to love it for all the wrong reasons. When I first joined the crew 3 years ago, I was running from something. A bad breakup, yeah, but more than that. I was running from myself, from the person I was afraid I'd become if I stayed in one place long enough to think about what I actually wanted. The fire camps were perfect for that. Constant movement, new locations every few weeks, physical exhaustion so complete that I'd collapse into my sleeping bag each night without the energy to examine my own thoughts. Then, Marcus transferred to our crew last spring, and everything shifted in ways I didn't understand at first. He showed up on a Tuesday morning at base camp in Montana, tall and broad-shouldered with this easy smile that made everyone warm up to him instantly. Our crew boss assigned him to my squad, and that first day, we were paired up as bunkmates in the tent we'd be sharing for the next 3 months. I remember thinking he looked too clean, too put together for this kind of work. His gear was new, barely broken in, and he had this nervous energy about him that made me assume he wouldn't last 2 weeks. I was wrong about a lot of things when it came to Marcus. That first night, lying in our separate sleeping bags with just a few feet of canvas between us, he started talking. Not the usual surface-level stuff guys share, but real conversation. He told me about growing up in Oregon, about his younger sister who was studying marine biology, about how he'd spent the last 5 years working construction, but felt like something was missing. His voice in the darkness was warm and genuine, and I found myself responding, sharing more than I usually did with new crew members. Over the following weeks, Marcus proved himself capable, and then some. He was strong, tireless, and had this uncanny ability to stay calm when things got chaotic. But what I noticed most was how he watched out for people. Not just me, but everyone on the crew. He'd notice when someone was struggling and quietly move to help without making a big deal of it. He remembered details about people's lives, asked follow-up questions about things they'd mentioned days earlier. The crew loved him. And I started to realize I was paying attention to him in ways that made me uncomfortable. The way his shirt stuck to his back when we were digging line in the heat. The sound of his laugh, which was this full-bodied thing that made other people want to laugh too. The way he'd look at me sometimes across the fire line with this expression I couldn't quite read. The first time he volunteered for my assignment, I didn't think much of it. We were working a fire in Northern California, and I'd been assigned to a spot fire patrol, checking for embers that might have jumped our containment line. It was tedious work, just me and one other person hiking the perimeter for hours. Marcus spoke up during the morning briefing and asked if he could take it instead. "Ryan's been pulling long shifts," he said, his eyes meeting mine briefly. "I've got the energy for it today." Our crew boss shrugged and reassigned me to work on the main line. I was grateful, honestly. My legs were shot from the previous day's hike, and the patrol would have been rough. I figured Marcus was just being a good teammate, but then it happened again, and again. 2 weeks later, we got called to a fire that had made a run overnight, and they needed someone to go in with the safety officer to assess whether a particular ridge was defensible. It was potentially sketchy, the kind of assignment where you're exposed if the wind shifts wrong. I'd been tapped for it because I knew the area from a fire the previous year. As we were gearing up, Marcus approached the crew boss. "Let me take this one," he said. "I've been studying the topography maps, and Ryan's been complaining about his ankle since yesterday." I hadn't been complaining about my ankle. It was fine. But before I could say anything, Marcus was already strapping on his pack, giving me this quick smile that seemed almost apologetic. The crew boss agreed, and Marcus headed out with the safety officer while I stayed behind, confused and a little annoyed. That night, when he got back to camp, I confronted him at our tent. "What was that about? My ankle's fine." He looked at me for a long moment, his jaw working like he was choosing his words carefully. "I know," he finally said. I just had a feeling about that assignment. Wanted to take it myself. A feeling? Yeah. He started unlacing his boots, not meeting my eyes. Sometimes I get them. About which assignments might be hairier than they seem. It was a non-answer, and we both knew it, but I let it drop. Mostly because part of me was afraid to push, afraid of what I might discover if I dug too deep into why it bothered me so much that he'd taken my place. The pattern continued through June and into July. Any assignment that had an extra edge of risk, Marcus would find a reason to volunteer for it if I was originally slated. A night shift on a fire that was making unpredictable runs. A burnout operation where we'd be lighting fire close to the main blaze, with only minutes to get out if conditions changed. A helicopter reconnaissance flight over an active fire, which sounds safer than it is until you're in a helicopter full of smoke with visibility near zero. Each time he had some reasonable explanation. He wanted the experience. He was less tired than me. He'd already studied that particular terrain, but his eyes, when he looked at me, told a different story. One I was too afraid to read. The crew started to notice. Our squad leader, a grizzled veteran named Patterson, pulled me aside one morning in late July. "Your bunkmate's got it bad for you, you know that, right?" My stomach dropped. "What?" "No, Marcus is he's being a good teammate." Patterson gave me a look that said he'd seen too much in his 20 years fighting fire to buy that line. "Kid, I've watched him rearrange his entire existence around keeping you out of the worst situations. That's not being a good teammate. That's something else." I wanted to argue, but Patterson just clapped me on the shoulder and walked away, leaving me standing there with my heart pounding and my mind racing through every interaction Marcus and I had had over the past months. The late-night conversations in our tent. The way he always saved me the better portions when we were dividing up camp meals. How he'd started keeping my favorite brand of energy bars in his pack and would hand me one without asking when he noticed I was flagging. The time I'd woken up cold in the middle of the night and found my sleeping bag zipped up more carefully than I'd left it, Marcus's form still awake in the darkness across from me. Oh, God. Patterson was right, and the terrifying part was realizing how much I'd been noticing Marcus, too. How I'd started looking forward to the end of each day when we'd retreat to our tent and talk for hours. How I'd catch myself watching him work, admiring not just his physical strength, but the careful attention he paid to everything he did. How when he laughed at something I said, I felt more seen than I had in years. I'd spent 3 years running from myself, from the possibility of wanting something real with someone. I'd dated women in my early 20s, because that's what you did, what was expected. But those relationships always felt like I was performing a role rather than actually connecting. Then, I'd had one relationship with a guy right before joining the fire crew, intense and passionate and ultimately destructive. He'd wanted me to be someone I didn't know how to be, and when it ended, I'd convinced myself it was easier to just not want anyone at all. But Marcus made me want things I'd been suppressing, and apparently, he was willing to risk his life because of whatever he felt for me. The realization made me angry. Not at him exactly, but at the situation, at myself, at how complicated everything had become. That evening, after dinner, I followed him away from camp, down to a creek where we sometimes went to wash up. He was crouched by the water, splashing his face, when I spoke. "You need to stop volunteering for my assignments." He froze, water dripping from his chin, then slowly stood and turned to face me. In the fading light, his expression was guarded. "I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do. Every dangerous assignment I get, you find a way to take it instead. It has to stop, Marcus." "Why?" His voice was quiet, but there was an edge to it. "Why does it matter to you if I want to take those assignments?" "Because you're doing it for the wrong reasons." I was nearly shouting now, months of confusion and fear and something else, something I didn't want to name, all bubbling up. "You're doing it because of some misguided idea that you need to protect me, and that's not fair, not to you, not to me, not to anyone." "And what if I want to protect you?" He stepped closer, his eyes intense. "What if that's my choice to make?" "It's not about what you want, Marcus. You can't just throw yourself into danger because you—" I stopped, the words catching in my throat. "Because I what, Ryan?" He was right in front of me now, close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, could smell the smoke and sweat and something essentially him. Say it. Because I what? My heart was hammering. Because you have feelings for me. The words hung between us in the cooling air. Marcus didn't deny it. He just stood there, his chest rising and falling with deep breaths, looking at me like I was something precious and fragile. And what if I do? He finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. What if I've had feelings for you since about 2 weeks after I met you? What if every time I see you heading into a dangerous situation, something in my chest tightens up and I can't breathe right until I know you're safe? What are you going to do about that, Ryan? I should have stepped back, should have shut this down, protected both of us from the complications of mixing feelings with work, with the already dangerous nature of what we did. But I didn't. Instead, I did something I'd been wanting to do for weeks without admitting it to myself. I kissed him. It was clumsy at first, both of us surprised, but then Marcus's hand came up to cup the back of my head and everything shifted. The kiss deepened, became something urgent and real, 3 months of tension and unspoken feelings pouring out in the space between heartbeats. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Marcus rested his forehead against mine. I can't lose you, he said quietly. I know we barely know each other in the grand scheme of things, but Ryan, I can't lose you. You won't, I said, even though we both knew that was a promise neither of us could actually make, not in our line of work. But you can't keep trying to take every dangerous assignment for me. That's not sustainable, and it's not fair to you. I don't care about fair. Well, I do. I pulled back enough to look at him properly. If we're doing this, if we're actually trying this, then we're partners, equal partners. That means we face the dangerous stuff together, or we take turns, or whatever makes sense for the crew in the situation. But you don't get to sacrifice yourself for me, Marcus. I won't let you. He searched my face, and I watched something shift in his expression. Relief, maybe, or acceptance. Equal partners, he repeated. I can work with that. We talked until it was fully dark, sitting on rocks by the creek, figuring out what this thing between us actually was and how we'd navigate it. The fire service isn't explicitly hostile to gay relationships, but it's also not the most progressive environment. We agreed to keep things private, at least from most of the crew, at least for now. But we also agreed that we were doing this, really doing this, trying to build something real despite the complications. The next few weeks were some of the best of my life. We still worked hard, still faced dangerous fires and long, exhausting days, but everything felt different. Better. I'd catch Marcus's eye across the fire line and see warmth there, affection, and it steadied something in me I hadn't even realized was shaking. At night in our tent, we'd lie close together, talking quietly, and sometimes more than talking, always careful to be quiet, to not draw attention. He still worried about me, I could tell, but he kept his promise about not volunteering for every dangerous assignment. Instead, we worked together more often, which our crew boss seemed to think was a good idea since we'd developed a strong working rhythm. And it was good, having Marcus beside me when things got intense. He was steady, reliable, and having him there made me feel capable of anything. Then came the incident that changed everything. It was mid-August, and we were fighting a massive fire in Idaho that had already burned through 50,000 acres. The fire behavior was erratic, driven by wind and the tinder-dry conditions of one of the worst drought years on record. Our crew was assigned to protect a series of structures, vacation cabins, scattered through the forest that the owners desperately wanted saved. Marcus and I were part of a 4-person team tasked with defending the northernmost cabin. We'd spent hours prepping it, clearing brush, setting up sprinklers, doing everything we could to give it a chance. The fire was still a few miles away, but moving fast, and we could see the smoke column towering into the sky, so thick it turned day into twilight. Around 3 in the afternoon, the wind shifted, suddenly and dramatically, the way it sometimes does in mountain terrain. One minute we were monitoring a fire that was mostly under control, and the next minute we were watching it make a run directly toward our position. Our squad leader, who was coordinating from a ridge above us, radioed down. "You've got maybe 30 minutes before that fire